Hey, hi there. I usually type a lot and talk a lot on social media about some of the current issues, and I'm trying to find more creative, clever ways to kind of get my message across to the people who are listening. And one of the most important things I kind of want to talk about is how we can talk to our family and friends who are more conservative, who are Trump supporters, and as we talk about things like defunding the police and equality as a whole, really trying to find ways to engage those conversations. I know it's hard. I know it's really easy to just call someone a dumbass and want to log off and move on with your day. At the end of the day, the people in our lives who we do consider our loved ones, ultimately they're going to hear us out more than anyone else. And I do believe it's our responsibility to at least to try and have those conversations. All that being said, I'm just going to kind of go over the 10 big points I think of when I think of having discussions or debates with conservatives and how to dismantle and debunk their argument with a good counter-argument. So, the first one I want to talk about it's the usual go-to when we talk about the Black Lives Matter movement specifically, and that is all lives matter. This one's really lazy at best, and at worst, it's a racist dog whistle. We never hear all lives matter when it's applied to really anything that goes beyond white communities or cops. I would love to live in a world where all lives matter was a thing. That would mean people advocating for the immigrant children stuck in cages. That would advocate for the LGBTQ plus community. It would advocate towards houseless folks. It could honestly be a really beautiful thing if we really talk about all lives matter, then all lives have to matter. Even the ones that we don't agree with, even the ones that we don't understand, and even the ones that we aren't exposed to. I wish when you said all lives matter, you meant it, but what I hear every time is I don't like that this discussion is talking about race, because that makes me uncomfortable. And to piggyback off that last point is my next point, and that is, number 2, why does everything have to be about race? The thing is that it has always been about race. White supremacy is not a new concept. It's existed as far back as the 17th century. It's existed far beyond the United States, but in the United States alone, we took this land, stole this land from brown folks. We then enslaved black folks to build this country. We continued to segregate our communities, our public schools, public spaces, to separate ourselves specifically from black folks. To this day, we are still underfunding black communities. It's been about race. You don't get to try and change the subject when we're talking about race because all of a sudden the conversation doesn't benefit you or the conversation makes you uncomfortable. And it's not even as if these people who are upset that we make things about race don't still automatically jump towards race. They want to bring up terms like black on black crime, which is redundant because if you did any research, you would notice that most crime is interrace, but you still have to single out this fake concept of black on black crime to prove your point. These are the same people who, when they are talking about a person of color that they don't care for or they feel threatened by, they usually jump towards racial slurs and racial stereotypes. That is still making things about race. But when we want to make things about race political, we want to talk about race and how we can reach what is like true equality, that's when you don't want to talk about it anymore, and that's not fair. If you're going to bring up race, let's talk about race. But since you wanted to talk about race, number 3 of my, well, cops kill white people too. You're absolutely right. Cops do kill white people, and that's something that you should be upset about, because by saying that, you're admitting that cops do frequently kill people, and that's not what we pay cops to do. But overwhelmingly, the evidence shows us that white people are 3 times more likely to come out of an interaction with a cop alive than black people. So by saying that, you're still doing a disservice to the fact that there is actual information that proves to us that it is more likely to be murdered by the police if you are black. Black people are systemically targeted by police forces. Number 4, cops are underpaid and overworked and deserve our respect. Let's break this down real quick. On average, a police officer in the United States makes about $53,000 a year. I think the starting wage is usually closer to $45,000, but this doesn't account for medical benefits, life insurance, tuition reimbursement, retirement plan, etc., etc. They have obviously pretty good built-in benefits for the most part. When you compare that with other professions, The average salary of a teacher is about $35,000, so cops are making about $20,000 more than teachers. This isn't necessarily about how we pay cops or teachers, but this is a conversation that we need to have about how we value labor. You should probably be on the side of the fact that we just don't view labor as valuable in this country. But also, if we look at how when we defund the police and we then again reinvest that money into mental health programs, first responder programs, community programs, you'll notice that the cops will be a lot less worked because there will be more people to do the job that they're expected to do and to do it right and to do it without somehow managing to kill someone in the process. And if you are someone who supports and respects the cops, then that should make you excited because that means that their workload would be dramatically reduced. But no, to your last point, I don't have to respect cops because being a cop is a chosen thing. You're not born a cop. And if you are a cop and you're refusing to call out the toxicity that that kind of environment seems to breed in that institution, then you can't demand respect because that institution is one that has a history of brutalizing innocent civilians, and that is not something that I'm required to respect. So while we're still talking about defunding the police, let's move on to point number 5, which is, well, who are you going to call if someone breaks into your house if we defund the police? Well, let me tell you, I have had my house broken into, I've had my car broken into, I've been assaulted, I have worked at businesses that have been robbed, where my employees have been assaulted, homophobic slurs and threats thrown at me, pretty much a slew of instances where I thought that as a citizen, it was my right to call someone for help. Now, I didn't call cops in all of these instances, and the reason why is because in 2013, when my home was broken into and I was 19 years old, we had literally gotten there as the people who broke into our home were leaving. Like, they were walking out the back door, we were coming in the front. The cops come out, we called them, and they didn't show up for like another 30 minutes. And again, these people just left. Pretty much like looked around, and then they told me to buy a shotgun. I was 19 and terrified, and their rebuttal was, we'll buy a shotgun. It wasn't help. Obviously, I'm not saying this because I think the cops could have prevented this from happening, but what I'm saying is that when my only assistance at the time was told to buy a shotgun, it kind of made me hesitant on how the cops wanted to respond to those situations. And if I can say this with several firsthand experiences as a seemingly looking generic white girl, what do you think are happening to the black folks who are calling for help? Most recently, you can look at Kevin Penn from Decatur, Alabama. He got a broken jaw and now a felony charge because he called 911 when someone was breaking into his business, and the cops walked right past the white burglar and started brutalizing Kevin Penn, who was the business owner. Tatiana Jefferson, she was shot dead in her home through the window of her home because someone called just to do a welfare check because she had accidentally left her door open. Their solution was to shoot her through her window. No announcement, no heads up. She was playing video games with her nephew. At the very end of the spectrum, you get brushed off. And you kind of have to live in that fear of like what's going to happen next. But at the very worst, it's a death sentence for people. And I don't think that that is making a connection for a lot of you, because you've never been in that situation where you had to worry about the cops gunning you down. So we're going to talk about the second part of that argument, and that is the 3 scary words of defund the police. Defunding the police means reducing the police budget and reallocating that money, like I said earlier, into other services, into an array of services, so that when we use that service to call someone for help, that service that we pay for, we don't have to worry about armed men that we don't trust showing up and maybe killing us. We can instead have trained therapists and first responders and traffic guards and a slew of public programs, and we know the right person's getting assigned for the job, and it's someone we can trust. Because let's be honest, no matter how you want to look at it, there is a distrust between the people and the police. So how do we fix that? Because we can't build trust from here. So we need to reduce that budget, which is over half of most cities' budget in America, and you put that into programs where we can build community trust again. Number 6, Not all cops are bad. There are just some bad apples. Okay, so did you know that cops are arrested 1,100 times per year? That's 3 times per day, often getting arrested for sex crimes, domestic violence, assault, drunk driving, pretty much kind of the most worst shit you could do. We don't have another institution that has those kind of numbers. So when we talk about bad apples, maybe it's not bad apples, maybe it's a bad tree, maybe it's a bad institution. This also doesn't account for the evidence of good cops that we do have, who are often ostracized, assaulted, and even in cases like Adrian Schoolcraft, psychiatrically institutionalized because he wanted to be that good cop who reported corruption, who reported other cops not following procedures or blatantly breaking the law. What happened to him, his fellow officers were so annoyed. He was so fucking annoying. They managed to get him ripped out of his home in the middle of the night and sent to a psychiatric unit for talking about conspiracies. They even made little commemorative patches for how they got the rat out of the system. He was able to file a lawsuit, and I do believe he won that lawsuit, but still it shows us how even the people we want to believe are the good cops get outed and pushed aside and bullied. There has to be a reason for that. So when we're talking about good apples, they've retired, they've quit, or they literally suffered for being good cops. Number 7. Well, so-and-so was so-and-so, and George Floyd was a criminal, and so-and-so had a gun. Oh my God, he was wearing a hoodie. He was no angel. We don't choose the people that the cops choose to murder in the streets. You want to talk about George Floyd? You want to assassinate his character? George Floyd had been out of the system for 13 years. His crime that he allegedly committed was forgery. Last I checked, police aren't executioners. Even if he had committed forgery, even if he had robbed the shop he was at, cops don't get paid to kill people. Every single person in this country has a right to due process, has a right to stand before a judge, is innocent before proven guilty, has a right to representation. And when these cops make the decision to murder them in the streets, that is an execution, and it is directly violating our rights. So if you care about our rights and you care about the Constitution and you care about protecting that, and if all lives matter, then you have to give a shit that that keeps happening somehow. And it doesn't matter what the character of a victim of police brutality turns out to be. The conversation here has never been, are these good people? Should these people be our heroes? No, but they're people. That's the key word there. Number 8, and that is, well, I have a black friend, and he says I can use these racial slurs, and he says that, yeah, this movement's pretty dumb. If you're using the black people in your life to shield you from criticism, then you need to reevaluate your relationship. I love that we live in a country that your black friend can have those independent thoughts and opinions, but you are doing both you and that person a disservice by shielding any sort of conversation with these kind of one-off statements. This doesn't account for the fact that maybe your black friend is uncomfortable sharing their actual opinion with you, or maybe thinks that they'll lose your friendship if they say otherwise. Maybe actually have a conversation with them instead of picking and choosing what benefits your argument. Number 9, looting and rioting are wrong. Protests should remain peaceful. That's what Martin Luther King Jr. would have wanted. No, it's not. Martin Luther King has gone on record several times for saying riots are the language of the unheard. We're not even talking about the fact that there is plenty of rioting and looting that can be directly contributed to white people. When we talk about thugs, yet again another dog whistle, we're not talking about the white people like the white woman who was caught starting fire to the Wendy's after Rayshard Brooks was murdered. Because often there are instigators in situations and there are people there for a cause, and it shouldn't cancel out the cause. Number 10, we'll vote the people you don't like out of office. Don't protest, vote. I'm not using this as a point to encourage people not to vote. It's been an important experience for me, but I do need to clarify this. When Democrats were in office, police brutality still existed. We were still having kids put in cages. When Democrats were in office, black kids were villainized by them. Not having an overtly racist government is nice, but voting someone in or out of office doesn't change the systemic institutions where this violence and this marginalization are coming from. That takes direct action. We've seen how protests work when it comes to things like women's right to vote or labor protests. Historically, protests have worked, and it takes so much more direct action and direct community engagement than just what voting does. Voting is the bare minimum. You have to keep educating yourself and educating the people around you and being involved in your community. The work doesn't end up voting. And if you want to encourage people to vote, that's awesome. But you have to understand that there are people who are still doing really good work out here and really important work out here beyond what it is to just vote. That is all I have. I really hope I can make another one of these for you because I know there are still a million other things that we haven't touched. If you are white, I do encourage you to kind of use this as a guide point into having those hard conversations. If you have some arguments that you're not sure how to approach or flesh out, you're always welcome to message me, and I would love to talk you through it and walk you through it. I really hope you folks enjoy, and thanks for listening.